Welcome back. My name is Amir Husak, and I'm the artistic director of this year's Bosnian-Herzegovinian Film Festival. And with me?
And my name is Dijana Jelača, in case you haven't seen me before, previous screenings, and I'm the programming director of the festival.
We have a great pleasure to introduce the screenwriter Elma Tataragić, who's here with us this evening, and she's someone who is known to this festival and has been here before. And since Elma has a really extensive and multifaceted biography, we will have to read it. So Dijana and I will decide to do it together. Elma Tataragić is a screenwriter and festival programmer. She's been with Sarajevo Film Festival since it was founded in 1995, and is currently a programmer for the competition programs and Cinelink Industry Days. She produced and co-wrote Snow with director Aida Begić in 2008, which has been shown at over 80 festivals and won over 30 international awards. In 2016, Tataragić directed her short narrative film, I Remember, which was screened and awarded at numerous film festivals, screened also here. When the Day Had No Name, 2017, directed by Teona Mitevska and co-written by Tataragić, premiered in Panorama Special at the Berlin Film Festival.
I'll do the second part. We need to do Elma justice, because it's such an incredible storied career already, and we also can't wait to see what she's doing next, which we will get to hopefully in our conversation. So God Exists, her name is Petrunia, was also, yes, that's right, written by Elma and directed by Teona Strugar Mitevska, same writer-director combo we saw tonight, which actually premiered in competition at the Berlin Film Festival in 2019. In the same year, the film Stitches, which we featured at our festival in 2020, remember that year, directed by Miroslav Terzic, was written by Elma Tataragić, also opened at the same festival in the Panorama section. Elma won the Best Screenplay Award at the Las Palmas Film Festival in Spain. Her film, The Happiest Man in the World, which we just saw, directed by Mitevska, had its world premiere in the Horizons competition at the 79th Venice International Film Festival.
Da je sreća ako je nemamo kome prenijeti.
Znači, hajde da se zabavimo.
Ja mislim da je ovo odličan način za poznavanje ljudi.
Ma dobro, ko pjeva zva ne misli, ja. Ti nisi Srbin, ja? Reci mi, jesi radio ovo ranije?
Ne, ovo mi je prvi put.
Please join us in welcoming Elma to the stage. Wonderful to have you again.
Great to be back.
So great to see you.
Such a great friend of our festival, and such an incredible creator and champion of Bosnian-Herzegovinian cinema and regional cinema, and as well as the programmer of our sister festival, Sarajevo Film Festival. Congratulations on this film. We will, of course, turn it over to the audience after we have a little conversation. So if you have any questions, there will be ushers with mics, so just raise your hand. Where to start? Based on a true story, we learn at the end. Do you want to say more about that? I don't want to probe too much.
No, sure. Well, I was ready to make a film about it, so why not talk about it?
Tell us.
A similar thing happened to me. Actually, I was wounded during the war. I spent the entire time of war in Sarajevo with my family. I was, of course, a teenager. And I was wounded like many people were. And a few years after the war ended, I had this crazy opportunity, but by pure chance, to meet a person, to meet the man, a young man, a bit older than myself, who has probably shot me. It was pure coincidence. We met at a theater workshop. I was studying dramaturgy in Sarajevo, and he was coming from another city. He wanted to become an actor. So he did some acting, and by pure chance we ended up in the same workshop, and little by little, through the conversation, we realized that we were at the same time, almost at the same place, at one particular moment, on different sides. And basically this event was so surreal. I always wanted to do something with it. And everybody asks, why not a documentary? But I did not want to make a documentary. I didn't want to go, because if you make a documentary on this, it will necessarily go into politics, which I didn't want to go into. I think that we are overwhelmed, especially in Bosnia, by the way the conflict was treated only from one point of view, but never really through stories of people who still live together, in fact. And this was a story that some people knew around me, and Teona, as we started working together, she also knew this story. And at one point, after we did Petrunia, actually before, when we did the script, but just before we started shooting, we always do a lot of projects at the same time, and some of them, of course, see the daylight, some don't. She came to me and said, well, I think it's time that we do something now in Sarajevo and that we go to this story and try to make something. Well, the film, I mean, the film, that the story which you have seen on the film, it's completely different. The circumstances are completely different, because we really wanted to make a very contemporary film about what it is to live in Sarajevo today, with the baggage of the past, and how the future and the future, the present life, and also the past are intertwined all the time. And we wanted to make a film about loneliness, in fact, not about war, but also we wanted to speak about a very strong anti-war sentiment. And I always, and also Teona and myself, we like to say that this is not a film about war, it's an anti-war film. When we were walking around, like for every film you walk around and you try to attract co-producers and people who will finance the film, everybody was like saying, oh, why? Another film about war, didn't you say everything about it? We said, but this is an important topic. And because there are always wars around us, and it's strange how somehow things, settle down, and the film premiered basically, even though we were preparing it for a few years, of course, it premiered in the year where another war started very nearby, between Ukraine and Russia, and then it suddenly again made sense to see this film.
To go to that story and to testify to the ongoing importance of telling such stories. Just quickly, a little follow-up on what you said. So, in your experience, so it sounded like, even though the story is fictionalized, the encounter that happened was a workshop. So it was a sort of a unity of time and place that you retain here as well.
In a way, yeah. Of course, it happened over a week. This workshop took a while, but this is happening, during one Saturday in Sarajevo, during a few hours. But yeah, it's a very theatrical proposition in a way. It's a very theatrical circumstance. And I mean, it's similar somehow to Petrunia as well. It's the same kind of unity of space and time, and it was also quite tempting to work on this and to write it, because we were always. It's at the same time it's very restrictive. But then it's very interesting for the actors, and it's interesting for the story. It's also interesting for the character development. So it was also fascinating to work on it. But it's at one point, after we were doing rehearsals with the actors, and when we did the casting, we realized that we could actually make a theater play out of this. And I hope that we will. We are planning to do something, of course, with a little bit different than this, but I think it has some kind of potential to, because of this, what you're saying, that it's kind of happening during a few hours.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Diana has said, and congratulations again on this film. It's such an incredible story, too, and your personal story, too, your personal experiences that are woven into this. But I thought a lot about when I saw the film, and maybe this is really under the impression of something else that I saw before, and I couldn't help but think about these dystopian game shows that, you know, the costumes, this, obviously this theatrical kind of a moment that it is present throughout, right, and the games. I thought about Squid Game and all these other series throughout, and I was really curious how how this writing process really occurred and what kind of things, because it's so incredibly effective in this kind of a film, and it combines things. It's sort of symbiotic in a very interesting way. So can you tell us a little bit about this process of writing and then coming up with these ideas, really, and characters?
You know, for like 20 years, I did not have an idea how will I set the story and what will happen. And then suddenly one day, I knew that it would be like a speed dating event, because I thought I needed something which is very contemporary, so far away from war, is actually people looking for love and trying to find, you know, another person who can understand them, trying to find their soulmates. And it was very funny because both Teona and myself, we had, I mean, our speed dating experience is basically, it comes down to speed dating at the film markets, which is quite similar in a way. You're trying to seduce this other person, a co-producer from some country, and say that you have the best film that they will ever
elevator
make.
Pitch and all that.
Exactly, elevator pitch, and it becomes very absurd. You know, after meeting number 10, it's like, you know, you don't even know your story. It becomes like something else. You're just saying it automatically, and it was very fun when we thought, okay, we are doing the speed dating event, but it's not, you know, when you don't know how to. So we were researching, and it was basically we were researching not only speed dating events, but we were also researching intimacy workshops and all these kind of games that exist for people to overcome some kind of a distance between each other, or to become more intimate. And it was very interesting because it's like a very and it's very unnatural in a way. It's very forced communication, but it is a communication. And if it's based on honesty, it can actually be very interesting, but it also has a lot of absurdity, and then it becomes funny at one point. And we thought that, you know, contrasting this humor and absurdity with the past, which is very tough and tragic in a way, would be a nice way to tell the story about Sarajevo today. Because if you look at Sarajevo today, or if you look at, you know, Bosnia, it's a very absurd place. I mean, it's you know, if you try to explain what happened in the past 30 years, you're not able to explain that. It's impossible to explain it. But at the same time, it's very simple. So it's very absurd, and we wanted to have this absurdity, this impossibleness of explaining something complicated and complex, but then again, doing it in a very simple way. And it was the key moment, you know, to realize that, yes, speed dating event, you know, that could be interesting. We also wanted to have a lot of people. We did not want to make an intimate film, because that could have also worked out, you know, intimate film between her and him. That would have been also a legitimate path to go and tell the story. But we wanted to start from a lot of people and then slowly move into the two of them, into their story, but to show other people in order to show the context of the story and to show how the world kind of functions with them and without them.
Now I just thought about something, just quick follow-up to that. I thought also about how this ensemble works, actually. But I thought there was something about this uniformity, them wearing these uniforms. And the art direction is very interesting to me throughout the film. There's something also that is very kind of It looks like an old, socialist hotel that we're in, right? The tables, everything.
Actually, it's a national library in Skopje. The film was not shot. I mean, the majority of the film was shot in Skopje because of the production reasons, and basically, this is a national library, which turned into the hotel as a place. We wanted to shoot the film in Holiday Inn, but
which was built after the earthquake, right, in Skopje. Or something.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, we like this. I mean, this brutalist architecture is, I mean, at least for Teona and me, is very beautiful. It also kind of shows. It has become an important part of our heritage, and it's interesting how we treat these places in everyday life, and it's also interesting in general, how people live in a certain city and how architecture becomes part of a certain city, and New York is one of the places like that. But also in Sarajevo, in ex-Yugoslavia, there are, there is a lot of architecture that we kind of take for granted, but it's very interesting. And we were quite sure that we wanted to make a film that would kind of expose this not only brutalist, socialist architecture because we like it, but because it also shows the context of the story, and it also shows it's like the reminiscence to the past in a way, and it shows the history that we all share in a very simple way.
And was Dejan Gusevski, the art director, was someone from the generation that really remembers, has a strong memory of that?
Yeah.
I was curious. Thank you.
Architecture is built into the film from almost the first shot when we see that building with the literal physical wounds of shelling, of the remnants of shelling. But you spoke about the ensemble and the humor. How the individual, the two-way encounter or duel, in a way, is interwoven in and out with the larger group. In and out in such a beautiful way. And sometimes these throwaway lines you hear in the background when other couples are answering questions that insert this humor or levity or just a reality check even. This is just such a beautiful screenwriting on your part. Just this, I wonder to what extent this was there, it came out in rehearsals you wrote, or just everyone was sort of having fun with it. But the humor is so real and authentic in so many ways. And another thing I want to mention is, you mentioned how when you were talking about the film, some reactions were, okay, another film about the war, which is something that we get as programmers when we're putting together the festival. Sometimes audiences say, well, okay, but can we also have some films that are not about the war? We know that that's an important story. So there's sometimes a sense that we've said anything or everything that can be said, which is obviously not true. But in this case, one really incredible thing is that you also tap in a very provocative way into perpetrator trauma. We know about the traumas of survivors, and that's been touched upon time and again. It should be through various different modes and lenses. But here, the way that Zoran, the character of Zoran, is depicted and built, it's not a simple story, and he doesn't get let off the hook easily, but he's also not demonized entirely. Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, well, I don't think, I really don't think it's fair to demonize everybody. I don't think everybody has the same responsibility. And when you are caught in a war, it's not something that you choose. Most of the people don't choose that. Most of the people don't really choose which side they're on. I know that it's not very optimistic to hear that, but you wake up and you live on one side of the front line, and there are other people, and it was not your choice. And sometimes you cannot get out, and not everybody is brave enough, and you cannot they're not responsible because of that. And a lot of people were not really asked what will be happening and what will be going on. On the other side, it's a brutal war. Is very brutal. If you become a soldier, then you really have to be ready to shoot and probably kill people. even though you have imagined to be something else in your life. And this is exactly what happened to the man that I met. He was recruited against his own will. And he was just 18. And they came to his door and just picked him up and said, "You're going to the front line." And then his life was hell, and it became hell. It turned into a totally opposite direction of what he dreamed. It really ruined his life. And a lot of people ended up like that. And I think it's important to talk about that side as well. I mean, it's not easy to be a victim, but it's not easy to be a perpetrator as well. And I think we have to be able to speak to each other about our own experiences. Of course, there are people who have responsibility and who had the power, and they should, of course, be responsible, and they should be in prison, of course. But a lot of people did not have this this opportunity, and I think that we have to listen to each other and learn from each other's experiences. You know, what the media and what politics is telling us, everything is black and white, but that's totally not true. You know, it's full of gray zones, of course, other colors as well. But we have to listen to each other and speak about traumas from that side and from this side. Otherwise, we will never be able to move on. As for the first part of your question, actually, we had even before we did the casting, we had all the questions answered by every character, and we had that written down, and then of course we had it kind of slimmed down to what we wanted to be in the film. And then when we did the casting, because it's an ensemble, it's a lot of actors, Teona never really, I mean, usually screenwriters, they finish the script and then they're not involved in the production, and that's kind of a normal thing. But Teona is different. So basically I participate in casting, and then when we finalize the casting, we do a lot of rehearsing. And especially for this film, we had, I think, over 1 month of real preparations, like in theater. Where then we also allow the actors to change things and to question things and to maybe, come up together. We come up maybe with some better dialogues, better solutions, better approach to certain scene. And then after this rehearsal, this 1 month rehearsal, then we kind of make the final version of the script. So basically, we also ask the actors to answer these questions, not as themselves, but as the characters. And we have tried to put this into the final version of the script. Of course, not everything could end up in the film. That was clear from the beginning. But it was important for them in order to lead their characters, because every character is really carefully led through the film. I mean, at least that's what we tried.
And succeeded in, and then some. The entire cast is incredible, but I do want to ask and mention Jelena Kortić-Kuret, the actress who plays Asya, who is incredible in this film, and we rarely see her as a leading lady in movies. Tell us about the process of casting her and the experience of having her as the leading actor.
Since Teona is not from Bosnia, she was spending a lot of time in Bosnia, not only in Sarajevo, but traveled a lot, not only to learn more about the story and about everything, but also to research, but also to meet actors. And basically she met, I think, everyone. We had castings in Sarajevo, in Banja Luka, so she really met everyone. But in fact, our casting director, she forgot to invite Jelena. So Jelena was, and then one day before completing the casting, she remembered in the afternoon, oh my God, we forgot Jelena. And she doesn't live in Sarajevo, Jelena. She lives in Mostar, which is not far away, but she's working for a theater, so sometimes it's not so easy to just, say, okay, tomorrow I'll go to Sarajevo for casting. But she did come, and it was love at first sight. I mean, she was the last one that we saw among hundreds of other actresses, and basically she was the one to be picked up. She's amazing. I know her for a long time. We've been studying together. We've been studying at the same time at Sarajevo Academy of Performing Arts. She was obviously studying acting. I was studying writing, dramaturgy. And I have worked with her before in Snow. She had one of the roles, not the main role, but she had one of the roles, and she's really amazing in theater and film. Also now she's starting to work on television. We just did a television series created by Jasmila Žbanić, but I was one of the writers as well, and Jelena had an important role in this television series.
It's great to see her more, and of course she was in Jasmila's Kovadi Seida in a supporting role, but really important, incredible.
Elma, you've shot in Skopje and Sarajevo, obviously. Your cast comes from a variety of different places as well. You worked with a Belgian editor, Kierkegaard, right? And also the cinematographer, Virginie Saint-Martin, also Belgian, I believe. And the productions list 6 countries. Can you speak about the realities of making feature films in Bosnia today, or in the Balkans, or in the region in general, or in the world, I guess?
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting path to make a film, but with Teona, Labina, the producer, also with Amra, and also with other colleagues that we now have in Croatia, in Slovenia, in Serbia. I mean, it seems like ex-Yugoslavia is still the core in a way, and then there are a lot of, when we are together, we can really do a lot. But then again, Teona and Labina and myself, we have been working for a long time with the Belgium company. And at this moment, Labina is also living in Belgium, and she's working for that company full time. And they have been co-producing and producing Teona's films since the beginning. It is not, I mean, it sounds very complicated, but actually it's not. And all of these people that you have mentioned, we have been working with them for a long time. And basically, they have become like part of our team. And it's for a film coming from Bosnia or from Serbia or from Croatia or in general from ex-Yugoslavia, it's not that unusual to have such an international crew and to work in such international circumstances. It's very difficult to even imagine to produce a film only from money coming from Bosnia. Our cinema is still not that strong, and we need the co-production partners. We need the co-producers, and we're actually lucky that we share the same language as our neighbors, because that makes things quite easier, because the market is basically the same. So it's a reality that we are working in such international circumstances. Even Teona and I, when we write, we basically first write in English because it's much easier to communicate with so many different people, Otherwise, we would be translating every single draft of the script into, 7 languages, which would be impossible. So we basically write in English and then translate into the later, when we know what we're doing, then go into, in this case, Bosnian.
And maybe a question also, also as a festival programmer and someone who's been involved closely with Cinelink, how has obviously COVID has affected everyone in many different ways. But in terms of production, after what we say after the pandemic, but pandemic continues. How do you, if you were to compare, what do you think really has shifted or changed, or what is the most kind of a dramatic shift that was experienced after the early days of the pandemic in terms of producing and working?
Well, not really much. I mean, in terms of producing, I mean, of course, there was a little logical break. But things are getting back to normal. I think even surprisingly faster than actually we thought. Well, the new thing is basically distribution of films and the promotion of films. That's changing. That's obviously changing, but that would have been changing anyways, even without COVID. Maybe COVID has pushed this a little bit further. What's actually changing is people don't go that much to cinemas anymore, and I think that's a reality that we have to embrace, even though even some big film festivals are not embracing this reality, but it's something that we have to embrace and to find a way to make it as a good thing, as something even beneficial for example, when we were, I mean, as you said, I'm also working for Sarajevo Film Festival. So in 2020 we had the first pandemic edition of the festival. We wanted to go through with the proper festival, but 10 days before we couldn't, so we had to move everything online, which was hell to do in such 10 days. And it's a big festival, so there are like 250 films, and there are also 4 competitive sections, and then there are different expectations from the filmmakers when you're presenting their film and inviting them instead of doing it online. But we had to do online, and it was incredible because we discovered a new audience. And we could actually follow where our audience is coming from, which we couldn't do before. You had to be in Sarajevo. So if you wanted to come from, I don't know, from Belgium or from Berlin, you had to be in Sarajevo in order to participate at the festival. But suddenly, of course, it was logical that we would have a local audience from Sarajevo. But it was interesting to see which parts of Bosnia are more interested in film. And we also discovered something very interesting that there was, I mean, comparing to our figures, of course, there was a lot of interest from United States. And suddenly it was like, wow, there is an audience interested in our content from such a distant place, and it was incredible. So I mean, it's interesting how and we still do a lot online. I mean, we don't do the festival is not the only thing that we do. We have many different programs throughout the year, and we do a lot of things online, and it's very important for promoting the films, and it can be very beneficial, and it is very beneficial even for the festival.
Speaking of people who still come to the festivals in person, our dear audience here, we'll just open the floor for any questions. Here's a hand.
Your film just kind of blew me away about the intimacy and the nuance of it. And I love the cinematography. I'm a filmmaker as well. But the key thing that got my attention was the hug between the two people. And in some of my films, I've looked at what the perpetrator and the victim share. They have a similar history that they go forward with. They're intertwined. Have you thought about that? What did the hug mean to you?
Well, I think you said it really nicely. We share a lot in common, in fact. But the hug means it's forgiveness, but it's also the closeness between these two people who share this moment, which for him and her, where it was a different thing, but it was a very important thing in their lives. For her, it was probably the end of her childhood, and it's kind of cut off. It's like that was the moment she became somebody mature. But for him, it was also the end of the childhood, the end of his dreams. So I think it's an important moment that they share. You know, when I met this guy who probably shot me, you can never really know, but I would say 95% that it's probably him. We still we don't talk that much anymore. I mean, but we are still in touch. But for a long time, we were very, very close. For a long time, we were writing to each other. We were speaking to each other for many years. Not only about that, but it was something which really drew us together in a way. And it's incredible, how life is stranger than fiction, and how these small things, of course, small, big things, can bring two people together. So this hug is actually, it's not only forgiveness, but it's also about responsibility. Because in order to get to come, to receive forgiveness from somebody, you have to be responsible, and you have to be able to say, I did this. Because without that, forgiveness is not possible, and without that, a hug is not possible as well. And that, 30 years, almost 30 years after the war, but 30 years since the war, 31 years since the war began, it's something we're very far away from, this ability to be responsible for what we did, for what I did, for what somebody else did. Denial has become a way of living. Not only denial what happened during the war, but denial in general. We deny things. We deny that there is somebody hungry on the street. We pretend that it's not there, because otherwise we cannot move on with our lives. So it's also about honesty and about looking at yourself through another person and through their experience, and how you and your actions have influenced their lives without you knowing, maybe, so yeah, it's all these things together, I guess.
Thank you. We have a question up there.
Hi, I just want to say your film was very beautiful, and I really, really appreciated it. Before the pandemic, I visited Sarajevo because I was going to make a film out there with a writer-director. And she had sort of told me about the history of what happened during the war. And so, as an American, I was not really aware before I had met her and before I had delved into the history of what had happened. And when I was in Sarajevo, I was very struck how beautiful the city was, but also how punctured it was by the remnants of the war. Specifically in the beginning of the film, where she walks by that wall where there's still bullet holes from the war. And you were talking about how architecture is something that we associate with a city, and it has its own inner meaning and inner logic. So I just wondered if you could just talk a little bit more about the architecture and how also there are remnants of the war in the architecture.
When you live in such a city, you don't even see that. So I think it was very important that Teona is not from Sarajevo. She had a kind of a distance, and she would point her finger towards things that for us are normal. For example, when we were sitting in my house and talking in my kitchen, the building just next to me is full of these, bullet holes and these punctures, which is something normal for me. I don't even see it. But she stopped at one moment. She said, "Do you see this? Do you see how this is incredible and how it's horrible, but it's also quite beautiful. These traces, these scars, which are outside on the buildings, they're also inside the people, and also on the people. So it's something that we share with the buildings in the city. But I think it was very important. I think for this story, it was actually crucial that Teona was somebody who is close enough but also distant enough to see some things that we don't see when we are, as Sarajevans living in Sarajevo.
Question.
Let me add my thanks for a fantastic film. And my question is whether the real Zoran has seen the film, and if so, what was his reaction? And if not, why not?
Actually, I haven't. I mean, the film was just 1 month ago shown in Sarajevo, and it was so hectic that I haven't even. I didn't even talk to him. I didn't send him a message, and I'll try to do that in the following months. I don't think he has seen. He doesn't live in a big city. He lives in a small city. Well, not even a city, a small place without cinema. So and he's not into acting anymore. So he's kind of away from this line of work. So I have to find a way for him to see the film.
There's another question up there.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you. This was kind of a beautiful roller coaster, and you mentioned about being an anti-war film, and I guess the contrast is probably the forced interaction of everyone colliding with each other and holding hands, and then you have her going off and dancing with these under 18-year-olds who do not have the scars that she has. Was that originally put in the screenplay? Did that kind of evolve through your discussions? And how did you feel it? How did your actors feel about it as they were going through it?
Everything was in the screenplay. I must say, everything was in the screenplay. From the beginning, I mean, that particular scene was there from the beginning. At one point, she would go away and dance with the kids and then be kind of kicked out because she's not under 18. And it was kind of going back to the years where, she was when this happened, in a way, and then dancing through this situation. And some people like this scene, but some people don't. There are a lot of discussions about this scene. I like it very much in a way. I'm happy with it, but I can understand for some people it's maybe too much. It's maybe too obvious. But for me, it was kind of cathartic moment for her to be finally to kind of be free. I thought it was, suddenly she becomes free from the war trauma, free from what happened to her, and kind of ready to embrace the future.
We have just time for one more, a really quick question. I think there was...
Two at once, quickly, and then we can wrap
There's
up.
one. Oh, somebody has a microphone already?
Do two at once, maybe?
Two, yes. Let's get two questions.
Maybe you both tell us your questions and we'll...
All right, there and here.
I have a question. So I'm like, I'll be the first lady. But you mentioned, obviously it's based on your true story, and I found it interesting that throughout her experience, there was a lot of that anger and resentment that is being thrown towards the perpetrator, and watching you on stage. And as you've been talking about that experience, you talk a lot about having the patience and forgiveness. But I'd love to actually know during that moment, if it's not too personal, delving into what you went through when you did meet the real Zoran. Did you go through a similar experience that she went to? Were there very explicit stages of anger and resentment and grief? Was that part of your experience?
Yeah, it was, but it took a bit longer. It didn't happen in a few hours, but it was. I mean, when we realized that we were that he was probably the one who shot me, it was quite shocking, not only for me, but for people around us, because it was not only me and him talking. We were discussing something that we would do for the workshop. And suddenly we realized that this happened. We had to make a break and then try to discuss it again tomorrow morning. But we did go through that, and I think it was for him more difficult than for me. I thought I was so lucky that I'm alive, that I'm not handicapped, that I could actually be quite comfortable with meeting this man, and being able to listen to his story and to forgive him. He really did ask for forgiveness. It was very strange. Because we were so young, we didn't really know what was happening. It was a surreal experience.
Sasha, quickly,
real
one
quick,
final.
Sasha.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is I really enjoyed it. It's a wonderful story also, and beautifully said, and cinematically it's so rich in a way it is delivered. But my question is, I have actually two questions. One is okay, I'll just keep one.
They'll kick us out.
Yeah, so there was a film that we saw in this festival earlier, Muškarci ne plaču, or A Man Don't Cry, and it is very similar in terms of setting, in terms of this drama or of perpetrator, but there are also differences between your films in terms of here we see a woman character and heroine, and there is this drama of forgiveness on both part of perpetrator and the victim that is beautifully developed. So if you can say something about whether that film inspired your screenplay or not, in a way.
No, we were very much aware of the film. I mean, it's not that we make thousands of films in Bosnia, so yeah, I knew very much about the film, and I know the filmmaker, and I've presented the film in Sarajevo. But I think the big difference is that the characters in that film, they're totally stuck in the war, which is very different from this film. Here, these people are living in present tense. So it is about how the past is present, but it's not very obvious. And of course, there are a lot of similarities, but I think that is the biggest difference. And yeah, of course, here there is a strong female point of view, whereas there, as we are watching the war veterans, it's not there at all.
The only female character is the waitress.
Yeah.
A great film, though. We recommend it. We showed it at the festival. Thank you all so much. Don't forget to cast your ballots. Thank you, Elma. Lovely to see you.
Thank you for coming.